Retiring with a pension sounds great until you realize there are more options than a Cheesecake Factory menu. Unlike dinner, if you choose wrong, you don't get to send it back. My name is Michael Baker, and I help couples prepare and plan for retirement. Pensions, although rare, are still out there in the workplace. Over the years, I've seen how some pension claiming decisions can create long-term peace of mind or long-term regret. In this video, we're going to cover a roadmap to help you understand all the options and the decisions that you need to consider if you have a pension. And if you stick around for the end, I have a special planning strategy or a bonus strategy just for you. The first thing that you need to understand when you have a pension are the payout options available to you. This is going to look like a menu of options with different numbers or different calculations based on what you choose. The most important thing here is to understand what each of these options mean. Here are some of the most common options available in pension plans. The first one is called a single life annuity. This one is typically the highest payout available. It's called a single life because the payment is based on you, the worker, your life or life expectancy. It's the highest payment because if something were to happen to you, typically there are no survivor benefits to a surviving spouse or to a beneficiary. The second type of payment strategy is called a joint and survivor payment. Now, this could come in a variety of options, but the most common ones are 100% joint and survivor, 75% joint and survivor, and 50% joint and survivor. These are payments that are going to cover 2 lifetimes, so it's got a joint lifetime payment. However, the payment option that you select will determine the amount of the continuing payment that goes with your spouse. For instance, if you are receiving $1,000 a month and something happened to you and you were on a 75% continuation, your surviving spouse would continue to receive $750 per month, but they would not be able to continue receiving the $1,000 per month because they only get the 75% continuation. The same thing happens for a 50%. If you were on a $1,000 a month payment and you had a 50% survivor option, then that payment would reduce down to $500. Now, the benefit is that the payment doesn't go away completely. However, you need to think about the reduction in income, especially if you're doing coordinated planning with your spouse. The last payment option that might be available could be something with a period certain. It may be single life with a period certain. It may be a period certain only. But what you need to understand is period certain is a certain period of years where that payment would be guaranteed by the pension plan or the pension company. So for instance, period certain, 20 years, you get 20 years worth of checks. If you have a life with a 20-year period certain, then it will pay out for the rest of your life or 20 years if you were to die within that 20-year period. If you were living longer than 20 years, so for instance, we're now in the 21st year, you are now on a life-only payment, meaning it's paid out the 20-year period certain, so that was the guarantee. We're now on effectively borrowed time, so now for every year that you are alive, you will keep getting those payments, but when you die, the payments stop. So that's the big thing with pensions is first thing is understanding these options, how you would be impacted for income purposes. And if you're planning with a spouse or trying to coordinate other streams of income, it's knowing what the payment will be. And if something were to happen to you, does the payment go away? Does it reduce? Is it cut in half? How will that work? The next thing that you need to understand if you have a pension is how that money is going to be taxed. Pension is considered deferred compensation or ordinary income. So whenever you begin receiving those payments, the payment structure, the tax structure is going to be ordinary income. This is the same type of tax structure that a withdrawal from a 401k or an IRA is going to receive. So From a tax perspective, there is necessarily no difference between an IRA dollar, a 401k dollar, and a pension dollar. They all come through and hit the 1040 as ordinary income. Because of this, one of the more common pieces of advice that's given to pensioners is to look at a lump sum distribution or a lump sum rollover into an IRA. For many workers, this pension benefit has been a benefit that's kind of been growing in the background, and they may have been having money up from their paychecks deducted into it. The company may have been putting money into it, but it's kind of been money that they couldn't touch, couldn't access until they retire. And in some cases, this lump sum payout could be a significant check that they could add to their current 401k or IRA savings. If you are considering a lump sum, I want to give you a word of caution. Many people will often just default to giving the generic advice of doing a lump sum rollover to an IRA. I strongly encourage you to do your due diligence and consider all of your options before making a lump sum decision. Let's talk about what happens with a lump sum. First, the thing that you most likely do not want to do is to do a lump sum distribution. Now, if you have a relatively small amount in the pension balance or it's not a very large lump sum, it's possible that doing a lump sum distribution can be folded very neatly into a retirement income strategy. However, if we're talking about a pretty large check in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, you don't want to do a lump sum distribution because that distribution is going to be fully taxable. Most likely, if you're looking at a lump sum, what you're going to be thinking about is rolling it into an IRA or distributing it out as a rollover so that it is not taxable. One of the things that you need to consider is how are you going to replace the potential guaranteed income that the pension would provide? If you have plenty of assets and you're not worried about the income, then perhaps a rollover to an IRA makes sense. However, if you're still on the beginning stages of putting your retirement income plan together, you need to consider the pros and cons of the guaranteed income benefits offered by the pension versus an IRA and what you're going to be doing with the IRA. It is not uncommon for people to look at the growth potential of IRAs versus the pension and what the pension payment would look like. However, I must remind you that growth inside of an IRA, especially if it is invested in the market, is not guaranteed. When you introduce market risk, there are a whole variety of factors that you have to consider when it comes to creating income. And in many cases, the IRA strategy may allow for more flexibility with income planning and planning for RMDs or even Roth conversions. So it's not that we don't like that the IRA strategy can be used. What we want to do is we want to do our homework and make sure that the IRA strategy is the best strategy for you. The next thing that you must consider is the impact of inflation and cost of living adjustments. Most pensions do not have inflation adjustments or cost of living adjustments. They are most likely going to be a level payment, meaning that once you start your payment with whatever option that you've selected, that payment remains level throughout your lifetime. Now, level payments can be great. Additional guaranteed income from a pension plan can be fantastic for a retirement income strategy. But we can't divorce ourselves from the impact that inflation can have over time. With just a 3% inflation rate, your purchasing power can be cut in half over a 24 or 25 year period. So you have to think about not just your purchasing power today, but what is your long-term plan to address inflation and how are we going to replace the lost purchasing power of those dollars over time? Again, this is often the argument that's given within the IRA strategy with rolling the money over and reinvesting those dollars. But you also introduce market risk when that happens. So you have to have a balancing act and look at this from an objective standpoint. The last big thing that you need to consider is the solvency risk of your pension plan. Many private companies have already started the process of de-risking themselves by selling or moving their pension plans to large insurance companies. In many cases, what started out as you receiving a pension check from your company has now morphed into people receiving pension checks from insurance companies. This is not uncommon, as many insurance companies are built to basically handle the risk much more effectively than private companies. So if you have a pension plan, one of the things that you want to make sure is you understand the solvency risk. Pension plans are required to submit reports every year to talk about their level of funding and their solvency. If you haven't been paying attention to those reports, you might want to start. There are definitely some risks where pension plans could come under duress if markets or there are other economic issues at play. This is often where you will hear things like the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, which backs up private pension plans. Now, the PBGC does have limitations, but I've seen over the years there have been some pension plans that struggle, and ultimately the PBGC takes over, and now checks are actually being received from the PBGC. So you want to understand, is your pension plan at risk? And if it is, who's going to back it up? Will it be the PBGC or will it be something else? If you are a public employee or you might have a government funded pension, you might want to look at the fundedness or the health or solvency of the state or municipality that is backing your pensions. Many government funded pensions could be facing shortfalls in the years ahead. So this is an area that you definitely want to look at. Now, I'm not saying that your pension is at risk of having its benefits cut short, but I think anyone that's got a pension needs to look at all the options and do their own due diligence so that you can understand, hey, is my pension actually at risk? And if something were to happen, what are the areas of recourse for us that are going to be receiving these benefits? This is something that if you're working with an advisor, you want to find out, give the information to your advisor so they could help you with the due diligence. And if you haven't been doing it, you want to make sure you start so that you understand exactly what's going on with that pension benefit. Okay, so if you made it this far, I promised a special bonus strategy for you to consider. Now, this may not be right for everyone, but I think that if you're looking at all the options for your pension, you should definitely consider this. One of the things that you could potentially do is look at using an annuity to replace your pension. There are a lot of factors to consider, but one of the things that many pension plans have actually been doing over the last 10 years have been transferring the liabilities over to A-rated insurance companies. If the pension plan can do it, maybe you should consider doing it yourself. This would mean taking a look at what payments are available to you inside of the pension plan and comparing what your lump sum could purchase for you as part of an annuity strategy. So what you want to do is you want to make apples to apples comparisons. For instance, if you're looking at a single life payment plan, you want to compare the single life payment with the pension along with the single life payment with the annuity. If you're looking at a joint with 100% survivorship payment option, you should compare that with the joint and life and 100% survivor option with the annuity. Now, here are a couple of reasons why the annuity may actually make more sense than leaving the money in a pension plan. First, if you move money from the pension into an annuity, this is typically an IRA rollover. So the IRA is now an asset that's on your balance sheet, and there will be a balance inside of the annuity policy, meaning you could start using distributions from the annuity. And if something were to happen to you or your spouse, whatever that remaining balance is could potentially go to your heirs. You need to make sure you use the right type of annuity contract and structure it correctly, but this would eliminate potentially lost inheritance if you left the money in the pension plan versus having the money in a private annuity. Secondly, if you begin activating your pension and you start receiving those payments, I've already shared with you that those payments come across as ordinary income. However, if you take the money and you move it to an IRA and you're doing a distribution, like using a guaranteed lifetime withdrawal or guaranteed lifetime income benefit, those are IRA distributions, which those are actually taxed the same. However, Once you get to your RMD age, those IRA distributions could potentially help offset future RMD needs or you having to take a larger RMD because you're already taking some money from the annuity. So there could be a lot of other factors to consider as far as flexibility. Perhaps you retire at 65 and you have other income sources, or you have some other things that may impact your income. Like maybe you have RSUs that are going to vest when you retire. Maybe you've inherited some money from your parents and you've got beneficiary IRAs that need to be distributed. So you don't necessarily need to start the pension income. Well, if you move that money into an annuity using an IRA, but into an annuity strategy, you could potentially defer that income longer, make the check larger, and activate it when it makes the most sense for you. So one of the things that you should consider doing, if it makes sense, as part of your due diligence, is do some annuity shopping on the marketplace where you could look at having a private annuity contract for yourself instead of just using the default pension option. Hopefully that makes sense. And if you agree that it makes sense to do all of your due diligence before you make a pension claiming decision, go ahead and give us a thumbs up or a like on this video. So as a quick recap, here are the 4 things you want to make sure that you do. First, you want to understand your payment options. Understand the different options and choices available, how they work, and the income that each of those choices will provide. Second, understand exactly how these dollars are going to be taxed. And if you're looking at using the lump sum rollover into an IRA strategy, make sure you understand and compare the cost benefits of using a portfolio with market risk versus your pension's guaranteed income stream. Third, inflation. Know that most pension plans do not have inflation adjustments. So the likelihood is that the longer you live, this level payment is going to lose its purchasing power over time. So you need to build in a plan to address inflation with your pension strategy. 4 is solvency. Many different pensions are structured differently. There's some in the private marketplace. There are some public pensions. I think everyone that has a pension benefit needs to understand the level of solvency and how that plan is being funded. Your pension plan is required to give you notices every year that addresses this situation. So make sure you're doing your due diligence and understanding how this benefit is going to work. And lastly, if it makes sense for you, look at creating your own pension by using an annuity strategy in the private marketplace. This would entail taking your lump sum benefit and placing it into an annuity contract that's going to give you some type of guaranteed lifetime income with added flexibility and some potential benefits that don't exist inside of the pension. In our view, the best way to look at your pension is to actually model out multiple scenarios as you do your homework and discover what path makes the most sense for you. If you'd like help walking through your options, or if you think you'd like to know a little bit more about how some of these different options could potentially apply in your situation, don't hesitate. Click on the link below and schedule your retirement vision call with our team today.